Welcome to Education in Time of War. My name is Rachel Raz, and today with me is Tiffany Harris. Hello, Tiffany.
Hi.
And Tiffany is the Chief Program Officer at Moishe House organization, and I've been very fortunate to be involved and work with Moishe House for the past 2 years. And Tiffany, before we even start, can you share a few words for those that don't know what Moishe House is?
Sure. First, thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to get to speak to you today. And I know you said it's an honor to work at Moishe House and you have the pleasure of working here, but it's really our pleasure as well. And you're such a phenomenal educator. And I know we'll get to talk about that in a little bit later in this conversation, but we feel very, very lucky to have you as well. So Moishe House was started in the early 2000s by my boss, David Siegelman, and the co-founder, who was my predecessor, Jordan Fruchman. When they were exiting college, this was a time where there were amazing programs for high schoolers and for people in college in the Jewish community, but not so much when you left college. When you're in university, no matter where you are in the world, you're sort of in this container and you have Hillel and a lot of different ways to engage. And traditionally, when people graduated university, if that's what they chose to do, you get married and you buy a house and you join a synagogue. And the world looks very different today. And even in the early 2000s when Moishe House was started, and people are starting that phase of life much later. So what they found is you exit college and then you don't really have a built-in Jewish community or ways to engage and connect meaningfully. And so what they started doing was just hosting Shabbat dinners. And the first Shabbat dinner they had, I think they let a few friends know, and then more than 70 people showed up. And so they really thought to themselves, wow, there's a huge need here. There's kind of a longer part of the story of how it eventually got funded. David tells it's a hilarious and amazing story that I hope everyone listening gets to hear at some point in time. But fast forward, it grew out to be what we call Moishe houses, which are 3 to 5 young adults. So we serve people in their 20s and 30s living in a house and putting on Jewish programs for their friends, their peers, and the Jewish community, and sometimes the non-Jewish community where they live. That grew to Moishe House Without Walls, which was started as an alumni program, but now it's expanded beyond that, where that is an individual running programs out of their home. Sometimes they partner with organizations, but for the most part, it's an individual as opposed to a group. We have Moishe Pods, which are 2 individuals living in a home running 3 programs per month. We have Base, which are rabbinic couples running programs out of their home. Based In, which is one rabbi. We have Adult Jewish Summer Camp, which is so, so fun. We have an entire Jewish education department that puts on immersive experiences and retreats and all types of Jewish learning. And our most recent program is called Embark. And so this is a program that builds cohorts and serves interfaith or multi-faith couples. So we started as Shabbat dinners, moved to Moishe House, and then we've grown to be more than 12 programs. Oh, and I'm actually missing one. I'm so sorry. The Jewish Learning Collaborative. So this one I know you're familiar with. It's one-on-one study with a rabbi or a Jewish educator. And so we partner with Jewish organizations and sometimes individuals so that they can study topics that they're interested in and engage in Judaism in that way. And I also study with a Jewish educator. My partner does as well. And it's been a really enriching part of the work, as I know it is for so many people who participate in it. So that's Moishe House today, 12 programs. I don't know if next year we'll have even more programs, but we've really grown to be just this amazing platform for all the different ways that young adults can engage in Jewish life and build and reimagine what Judaism looks like today and tomorrow.
And I've been very fortunate to be involved with some of this program, including the JLC, the Jewish Learning Collaborative, and be one of the educator. And I see the impact on the people that I work with. So are you only in the United States? Where are you located?
Yeah, we're all over the world. We're in virtually every continent. We have a large concentration in North America, so that's the US and Canada, but we are in Central and South America. We're all over Europe, Eastern, Western, and Central Europe. Until very recently, we had a really large program in Russia, so we were even in Siberia. We had Moishe houses in China. We even have Moishe houses on the African continent, so we're in Asia as well. So we are really everywhere where the Jewish community lives in big and small numbers, you will find Moishe House residents, alumni, and community builders. And I'll also add that I was a Moishe House resident for a number of years here in Washington, D.C., and then I was an MHWOW host. I loved going on retreats. And as I've traveled around the world, because before I came to Moishe House, I had an international role, I would always try to visit the Moishe House. So I visited Moishe Houses around the world. And I remember even I was in Japan for a conference at one point in time, and there were Moishe House alum there that I was able to connect with. So it's really this incredible global community that oftentimes feels like a really tight-knit family. So I feel privileged to be in this role, but also privileged to be a Moishe House alumni.
And I also, when I travel, I go and I visit the local Moishe houses. When I was in Melbourne, Australia, I visit two of the houses. Met with the resident. When I was in Israel, visited two of the houses in Israel, and of course in the United States. So it's lovely to meet the young adult and to see how they're already leaders, but helping them to become even more, grow into the leader that they can be, and the community builders, and also invest in their education. So Tiffany, Moishe House is a global organization working with young adults. When I started this podcast, it was in relationship to the war in Israel that started on October 7, 2023, and impacted, of course, Israel with the entrance of Hamas terrorists to the southern part of Israel. Unfortunately, since then, it grew, and it's also involved the Hezbollah in Iran and Yemen, and within Israel, it's a very challenging time. Maybe you can share with us a little bit how it affected. I know that there's houses in Israel, but there's also how it affected different houses around the country and the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say this war is happening in Israel and on the borders of Israel on like many different fronts. And in some ways, it also feels like the war is happening in all of our communities and in our streets and the places we serve, which has also been a really challenging and frightening time for all of us. I'll talk about our community builders, but I want to start with our staff because we have an amazing staff here at Moishe House, yourself included. And we've all been really, really affected by this tragedy that's been happening. And we couldn't do the work that we do without the incredible community managers and the staff that supports our houses around the world. Not one of us was unaffected by this tragedy. We're a tight-knit community, and I think all of us feel some connection to Israel. And I think people realized how deep that connection goes post October 7th. And so people were really affected. Families were affected, friends missing and, murdered loved ones. So we put a lot of healing spaces in for our staff. Thankfully, we have a number of Jewish educators, again, like yourself, Jewish educators and rabbis on staff who really helped us work through this period so that we could center ourselves in the times when we needed to and really bolster our strength to be able to support our young adults who are in some ways, I hate to even use this terminology, but on the front line supporting their communities. So we want to make sure that we're equipped to give them the skills to be able to serve in these positions through the trying times. And our community builders jumped into action very quickly, as we, know they would, but it's always like really reassuring and surprising to see the different ways they respond to crisis and tragedy. And so a lot of them just immediately opened up their Moishe houses, Moishe pods, or if they're an MHWOW host, the bases to be healing spaces for their communities. In some communities, people just wanted to sit together and talk and process and grieve and cry. And some places they just wanted to get together and not think about what was happening and to laugh and just experience Jewish joy together. There were a lot of fundraisers and different programs to provide immediate relief to different organizations that were responding to the war in Israel. And so there was a variety of responses around the world, depending on what the needs of the community is. And I will say that's one of the really unique things about our programs is each house, each pod, each resident, each base is so unique to the dynamics of their community. We as an organization could never serve adequately all the different niche groups around the world, but we have our community builders who also help inform us of what those needs are, help influence a lot of the decisions that we make. but are really agile and responsive in a way that a large organization could never be. So thankful for them. They jumped into action very quickly. They raised a ton of funds, provided direct relief. And in Israel, the response looked very different because they were, like our house in Beersheba, for instance, they actually lost a number of community builders in the different attacks, both people who were serving in the military and people who were at the Nova Festival and some folks who lived on the kibbutzim. So it was a huge, huge tragedy. And then a lot of our Israeli community builders were then serving on the front lines in Israel, protecting the borders and responding to this crisis. So they had a very, very different response. And then we have a number of houses in Israel that serve the RSJ community. So that's the Russian-speaking Jewish community. I know in this day and age, we probably need a different title. So if anyone has suggestions, we'll be workshopping it because of the geopolitics and the conflict with or the war between Russia and Ukraine. So a number of those individuals don't serve in the IDF. They're Olim Hadashim, newly immigrated from Russia, Ukraine, and sometimes Belarus and the surrounding areas. And so for a lot of them, I was checking in with them immediately after the war. They were driving around Israel doing laundry for people who were evacuated from the kibbutzim or people who were evacuated from the north, providing babysitting services. We had a lot of people that were going to restaurants or hotels and helping to cook meals for these different families. So they really just jumped into action, doing whatever was needed to support their communities. And that's, I think, what our community builders are really known for. We get really great leaders who want to be a part of this program, and we try to provide them with the training and skills to be even better leaders. But this moment, as tragic as it was, and I wish that it never happened, was a moment where we were really able to see that leadership in action in a way that I still find it really inspiring. And if I talk about it too much, I'll start to tear up because I was so moved by everything that they were doing. Yeah.
No, absolutely, to see, and that's one of the nice thing about Moishe House, that you can come to every house and it's very different. Because it's the people that are building it. They're bringing their own personality, their own interest, and they're reacting to the community that they build. And it's nice to see how they adapt in any situation. And we can later on talk maybe about the other crisis. But I know that you prepared for us some examples and some photos, and maybe we can jump into that and look at some, because they are very inspiring. So I know that you mentioned that the level of the numbers of program increased since the October 7th.
Yeah, so we at Moishe House, for our houses and our pods, we have the residents do a variety of programs. So they do Tikkun Olam, that's like social justice and direct service programs, Jewish holidays, and one of the program types that they do are Israeli culture and holidays. And post October 7th, we saw this increase more than 233%. I think this data goes through November, so it's even higher right now. So that was compared to the same months in 2022. So you can just see here like the incredible interest and response post October 7th. And we're seeing that continue to rise. And I will say with the Jewish Learning Collaborative as well, those numbers increased exponentially. The number of people seeking Jewish education and counsel and pastoral care from rabbis and Jewish educators really increased post October 7th.
And I saw even with the people that I work with and with education, they also wanted to learn more, and we use this time for that. And also the resident I work with, I mostly work with the New York houses and the Boston. Immediately they reached out and asked me if I can support in one way or another. And we're going to see it in some of the examples.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as we flip to the next slide. Like in so many ways, I feel incredibly lucky, and I know, the people who participate in Moishe House and in Jewish Learning Collaborative feel so as well, that we have this, tradition, Jewish thought and wisdom and text to help us get through these really challenging times. And I think that that's part of the reason why we see this huge increase right now, is this is a challenging time, and this is an inflection point for our community, and Jewish wisdom can help guide people through that.
Yeah, and we just celebrated the holiday of Passover, which it's also teaching us about resilience, about like in every generation, somebody is coming to, challenge us about our freedom and our freedom to be who we are, and which also help us with this understanding and moving forward. So maybe you can share with us a little bit about this example.
Yeah, so the first one we'll look at, and we'll get to see, we talked about how Moishe House is really a global organization. So I'm going to take you around the world to different Moishe Houses and MHWOW hosts to see what they've been up to. This was a really beautiful program in Milan at our Moishe Pod there. And again, Moishe Pods are two individuals that live in a house together, and they run 3 programs per month. So they partnered with a local Israeli organization and went to a Jewish retirement home in Milan. And what they were doing was gardening and potting plants with the residents. The residents of the nursing home, our residents at Moishe House, they just noted how good it was during this time of great need to be working with your hands and to also have an intergenerational event, because also in times of crisis and trauma, Jewish wisdom is incredibly helpful and powerful. And it was also really powerful for the community to be hearing from our elders and all the wisdom that they have to share. So yeah, that was a partnership program with an Israeli organization, and got to go to a retirement home. The next one, yeah, it was really wonderful. The next one will take you over to Los Angeles for our RSJ house. And again, RSJ stands for Russian speaking Jewish. So this was another really beautiful, impactful program. And you can see they're writing letters. So they were writing letters to an Israeli children's organization that supports children who are affected by the war in Israel. And so they were writing letters of support and drawing pictures and writing sweet poems so that these kids can get these letters and know that they are loved and cared for around the world by the Jewish community.
And it was so valued. I know in Israel, when they received those, I have several of my friends, an educator worked with refugee Israeli within Israel. And when they received those, it really impacted them very positively during this very traumatic and challenging time.
I'm glad to hear that. And of course, wish the need wasn't there, but really inspired to see our residents step up in this way. And as I was putting this together, there were so many amazing programs and fundraisers and letter writing campaigns. I was like, I'm trying to choose like a variety around the world, but there were so many great examples to choose from. So this one is from Moishe House, London, Camden, and there are a few interesting things about this house that I'll note. So we have a resident in this house. His name is Sam, and he actually serves on our board of directors. So one really unique thing that Moishe House does is every year we have a community builder who serves on our board of directors. And this is our like big board of directors that evaluates our CEO, my boss. This community builder has a board vote. So they vote on policies, finance, governance, all of those different things. And we really think that it's so important to have the voice of the community builder in all the decisions that we make. So that's just one unique way that we do it. Every time we talk about different things, we're like, bring in the voice of the community builder. But Sam, who lives in this house, serves in that role, and we're really lucky to have him. So another interesting thing about this house is that one of the residents, Jonah, he served in the IDF, and so he was obviously deeply moved by the war and everything that's happening. And a dear friend of the house was killed on the October 7th attacks. So they hosted a lot of different types of programs, and this particular one was it was a fundraiser for Magan David Adom. They raised more than 400 pounds just in this one event. And it was a special Israeli themed Shabbat dinner. I think they ran this like 6 different times and raised thousands of pounds for the organization. So they've been trying to honor their friend's memory and provide different support, and also support and relief for the community that they serve, who's also been deeply affected.
Beautiful. Yeah, this one I can actually say.
Yeah, you're in one of these pictures.
Yeah, I'm
Guest
in
appearance.
yes, I'm in the middle of the group with the Moishe House logo picture. So actually, one of the residents, Aya, reached out to me and said, "We need to do something. We feel that we hear the news, we're in pain, we don't know what to do. What can we do locally?" And I connected them with the organization, the IAC, the Israeli American Council, that also have a young adult program, and they actually turned their offices into a war operation center, and packing packages to send to some of the refugees in Israel, some of the soldiers in Israel. They also had on staff volunteer that are social worker and mental health specialists to support the community. When we came there on the left, you see they brought a therapy dog. And we did it together, actually 3 different houses in Moishe House in the Boston area, together with a young adult program Edge of the IAC, because I also wanted them to meet. They didn't actually connected with the Israeli American Council, a young adult in the Boston area, so it was an opportunity for them to meet each other. And they came and we spent the full afternoon of packing and conversation. And the interesting thing that with some of them that they mentioned, that most of them work or study in non-Jewish organizations. And they felt that when they come to work or when they come to school, the world around them didn't really understand what they're going through. They came and everybody said, "Good morning, how are you? How was your weekend?" And nobody knew
They're
around
thinking,
them.
I'm shattered. Nobody
Yeah,
understands.
nobody knew what they're going through. And when they came to this space and they felt that everyone in this space know exactly what they're feeling, it was such a comforting for them. And in some way it made me humble, because I said to myself, how many times I go to work and maybe people go through a hard time and I'm not aware of it, like a colleague of mine that his family is in Ukraine. I did ask about it, but or a friend of mine from Syria during the war in Syria, it has actually made me think about all of the people around me. But for them specifically in this time, they appreciate the fact that they could be in this space and share it and be together. So it was uplifting. And I have to say that that was the beginning of a collaboration later on with the IAC. We later on had 2 other events. We called them the Human of Israel. That we brought different speakers to share about their personal stories, because sometimes when we think about numbers, Israel is almost 10 million people, or we talk about 1,200 people that were murdered in the beginning of October 7th. Big numbers are not individual, and each individual has a story. And to be in a place when we did the Human of Israel, every time it's one person's story.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier to relate, much easier to connect.
Absolutely.
Yes, so this is a little bit about this particular event in the Boston area.
It is a big focus of ours, especially this year, is building a living bridge between our community builders and the people of Israel. So we have a lot of different initiatives to bring emissaries and Israelis to our different programs, but just yet another reason why I think we're so fortunate to have you. And I think this program is a good highlight as well for one of the really unique pieces of our Jewish education department. We have what we call Jewish life specialists, and you serve as a Jewish life specialist. And so our residents and community builders really around the world will reach out for guidance, advice, resources on how to deepen the Jewish content or meaning and impact of their programs. And so I think this is just one example, but there are so many. I know our community builders really lean in heavily with the Jewish life specialists, especially as it relates to creating content and curriculum for Jewish learning programs.
So we can,
Go ahead.
yeah. Now I was jumping to the next one because there are so many inspiring programs.
Yeah, so this one, Upper East Side in New York City, right after October 7th, we made the quick decision. Normally, our community builders, they schedule their programs a month out so we can get them approved and budget, and there's a whole sort of back-end operational system that requires that, we plan in advance so that we can adequately support the program. After October 7th, we said, let's scrap it. Whatever you had planned, you can cancel it, you can pivot, you can run what your community needs. And again, like we said, sometimes that was just listening sessions. Sometimes that was people getting together and just being in community. As you said, it's so important, especially for people who work outside the Jewish community and feel alone and need a space to be together. So this was one example of that. They had like a candle making workshop that they planned, which in normal times would be a really cool, fun event. They immediately pivoted and they ran a challah bake to raise funds for lone soldiers through an organization called Friends of the IDF that a lot of our houses partner with. And this was a relatively small event because they had to pivot really quickly. I think there were just 10 people there, but they raised over $800 for the organization. And it's another program that they ran a few times and was really popular.
Yeah, and we're jumping to another part of the world.
Yeah, now we're in Canada, in Alberta. This is a Moishe House Without Walls host. Again, one of the ways to respond. Some people wanted to talk about the war and the crisis. Some people wanted to just sit and be in community, and some people wanted to find ways to experience joy. And this is one example. She pulled a group together. It was an Israeli solidarity event, but they held it at a cat cafe. They were like, we just want to pet cats and cuddle with cats and be together in community and talk about what's happening, but in a space where we can experience joy. So I think this just highlights the variety of ways that people wanted and needed to respond.
And this is also a conversation that I have very often with some of our resident, the community builder, about joy. You know, that this is also, it's a Jewish value,
Yep.
v'samachta, like to be joyful, and even in hard time, how to deal with challenging time in a way that it's good for us, because we need to
Yeah,
take care.
and to hold that tension of joy and sorrow. And so, yeah, these are all examples of that.
Yeah, so we can jump to another to Tel
Yeah.
Aviv. Yeah.
So this one is in Tel Aviv. I will say this young woman in the middle, our residents are so impressive and interesting. She speaks like 6 languages. Can't remember, she was either born in Azerbaijan or Turkey, but she has lived around the world, and she's just a really incredible community builder. So this one is in Israel and in partnership again with Magan David Adom. They did a first aid training. So they were learning about resuscitation, how to use a defibrillator, how to stop bleeding and that type of trauma. This is obviously like, this house had a lot of friends and community members who were in Nova and who suffered wounds and shrapnel and different things like that. And the house thought, okay, we don't know where this war is heading, but we want to be able to respond in many different ways. And sometimes that means providing the life-saving support that this training can provide. So they had 180 people register for this event, which I think just highlights the need and demand. Only 20 people could participate because it's very like you need enough like dummies to work on, but so they ran it a few times, but again, it's one way people were jumping in, and it was a fundraiser, so they raised several $100s for the organization as well.
And it's also like everyone want to be useful. Everybody want to do something. And this is giving the skills and taking responsibility, which is very important for every citizen, not just for young adult, but for all of us, to know that we are needed and we can do something and we are not just standing aside.
Yep, exactly. Our residents definitely don't stand aside. So Moishe House Prague in the Czech Republic, this event was specifically for Israelis who were living in Prague. And again, talking about, one of our goals is to create that living bridge between young adults living in the diaspora and Israelis. And so they opened their home and they wanted to make it a space where Israelis, you're welcome here. We see you, we're holding you, we understand the pain that you're going through. So they had 23 Israelis show up and then a number of different community members, and they had Israeli food and Israeli music. And it was just a solidarity event and a way to be together.
It's beautiful. And we're back to the United States.
Back to the United States in sunny California. This one was in San Diego. This is again a Moishe House Without Walls host. And so she facilitated Israeli discussion over shakshuka. So she gets a group together periodically. I think they meet every other month and they just talk about what's happening in Israel, trying to educate people on the issues and build those connections. And of course, what's better than doing that over delicious Israeli
Food.
food?
Yeah, yeah, and again, it's the idea of connecting, educating, supporting each other, seeing each other, all of these like very important values that Moishe House is bringing.
Yeah, and they're building a space. They're like, if you don't know, it's okay to ask. Like, I think a lot of people feel, ignorant or self-conscious about, how much or how little they know about the conflict or the history. And so this is a really safe space to ask those questions and to learn and have dialogue. And I know that this host gets quite a variety of thoughts and opinions and backgrounds, which is also beautiful as well. So.
And this is something that a little bit is missing right now. We're talking, it's April 26th, and I see all of these like riots and protests on college campuses. That people are not actually having conversation. People are not learning. People are shouting some things that are actually not rooted in facts,
Yep.
or maybe they are fake news that they are listening and they are follow. So I think that to create a space that we respect each other, we learn from each other, we bring different speakers and we learn from opinions. This is something that we can definitely, I wish that we can duplicate and bring more.
Yeah. And we do this well. It's a Jewish value, right? Machalot l'shem shamayim, arguments for the sake of heaven. We really value a diverse set of opinions and backgrounds and experiences. And I mean, even in our Talmudic tradition, right? It's like hearing all of the different voices. That's how you uncover deeper learning. So we try to train that, and we support our residents in building those spaces as well. And you don't necessarily see the impact right away, but I think long term, it will build the kind of world that we all want to live in and be a part of.
And I have to say that every time that I'm talking to one of our residents, I feel better. I said, like, wow, we are helping this person to become even a bigger, leader with a bigger impact. And I come out from every conversation more optimistic. We just need to find a way to scale it and share it.
Yeah. For
And
anyone, if you need to feel inspired or your faith in young adults restored, like go to a Moishe House, go to a Moishe House program. It really, I mean, even for me, I work in this space and I love going to different Moishe Houses, and I'm like, okay, I feel good about the direction the world is heading through this like small microcosm of our programs.
yeah, and I hope that through this podcast, more people will learn about it and maybe think about this like model of raising leaders that are caring, compassionate, like to learn. And
Yeah. So as we talk about, scale and how to get the word and the message out, this was a really interesting program held in Boca Raton, Florida, with an MH host. And it was called Podcasting 101, and they were training people to run podcasts. Like, how do you work with this different audio equipment? How do you build scripts? How do you do a run of show? Bring guests on, interviewing 101, because these were all individuals who were really interested in what's happening in Israel and want to get the messages out. And they found it a really interesting way of building Jewish community and educating people. So they learned from some local professional podcasters, and this is one way that they will be able to educate others in their community in a pretty big way.
yeah, no, it's wonderful.
They're so creative. So we're going back overseas to Finland. This was another fundraiser. It was a beautiful challah bake that the residents did almost immediately after October 7th. In this first one, which was again relatively small because they jumped into action the very next day and got the invites out right away, but raised more than 600 euros. And they send it to different relief organizations in Israel. So this is again a series program where they do this challah bake. It's really fun and interesting because it's like people get to connect to this tradition. They bake the challah that they'll use for Shabbat, and then they sell different loaves, and then they're giving the funds back to the community. So I really loved this program.
And connecting to each other. I think this is what
Yeah.
we need. Lots of people are very lonely, and to create this opportunity for them to connect, it's very, very important.
Absolutely. And amazing to see Jewish life, young adult life flourishing in Finland. And the last one I'll share about is RSJ in Philly. So they run a series, it's Israeli style Shabbat. Again, what a way to connect to Israeli culture and people through the magic of food. So they cook different Israeli foods, they invite the local Israeli community, they try to partner with local Israeli organizations. But it's a solidarity event, it's an education event, and it's just one way of appreciating and diving deeper into Israeli culture and people. So that's just a small sample of the different programs that have been happening recently as it relates to Israel and how our community builders are responding in big and small, but always really impactful ways.
And for those that are not familiar, now they're going to be more familiar with Moishe House. But this is just about Israel. If they want to learn about observance of Jewish holiday, and you mentioned Tikkun Olam, social justice, there's so much going on constantly. Community, like building community, being together, learning, so many opportunities. It's really heartwarming to see.
And they're so creative. They're really, really creative. And we also have a program called peer-led retreats where people run immersive experiences for their community. And the ways people are like reimagining Judaism or bringing Jewish life to all sorts of different topics is just so, it's fascinating, but it's also really inspiring. So yeah, this is just our Israeli programs, but there's a multitude of programs happening around the world on a lot of different topics.
And I know, Tiffany, before we conclude, Moishe House is a global organization. I know that on our channel where we have news, we also have crisis in general. It's not, this is a big one, but it's not the first one that Moishe House had to deal with. Maybe you can say a few words about other things that happened and how Moishe House has reacted, or our residents.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say luckily in this position, and you're absolutely correct, it's not the first crisis we've weathered in the recent years. I have an international development background, and I come from a world where I served as a crisis stabilization officer for a large federal government institution. And so I didn't think that I was going to need those skills and practices in this role, but very, very happy that I did that earlier in my career, because we worked in political unrest, tsunamis, earthquakes, violence, all different types of situations. And unfortunately, that is the world we live in, especially when we serve in communities abroad, and domestically as well. So when I came on board in this role, we were right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so around the world, people were experiencing lockdowns. This is particularly challenging in our community and the work we do, because so much of our impact comes from face-to-face, people-to-people connections, which happen so beautifully in person. And it's a little bit more challenging when it's done virtually. So we had to jump into action and build the mechanisms that would allow people to connect safely. So previously we had policies around, programs need to happen within a Moishe House. That got scrapped during the pandemic. Now people program in parks and different spaces, wherever. It's added like a lot of nice variety to our programs, but it also allows people to, if somebody is sick or, God forbid we experience another pandemic, that they can gather safely. We also really expanded our virtual offerings and all of the different things that we can do online. It doesn't replace in-person gathering, but it allowed the residents to run different retreats, workshops, gatherings, connect with people safely. So that was during the pandemic. Thankfully, it feels that we are more or less on the other side of that. But, that I think helped us build some muscles around being able to adapt very, very quickly. You have a plan that you are willing to scrap and build new policies that will allow us to serve our communities. And so the next big one we experienced is the tragic war in Ukraine in February 2 years ago. I can hardly believe that we're approaching like the 2-year anniversary, but we had a number of houses in Ukraine, and we also had a number of houses in Russia. So, and we had staff in Ukraine as well. So we helped facilitate the move of a number of our staff members so that they could move to the western side of the country, which was more safe at the time. Same with our community builders. We started an emergency relief fund, which I'm so thankful for our community that they responded to. Much like with the crisis and the war in Israel, our houses all around the world were hosting programs like borscht cooking fundraiser, or like learning Ukrainian language. There's like a special like cross stitch that they do in Ukraine that's really beautiful. And we saw houses learning how to do that, and just this solidarity and support with the people of Ukraine. And we also drastically reduced the number of programs that our community builders were required to do in Ukraine. That's still the case today, because it's an ongoing war and a very challenging situation for them. And then eventually this also led us to having to close our houses in Russia, which I I hate to use the word close. I like to say pause, because I really hope that, the financial and geopolitical situation will one day allow us to go back into Russia, where we have the most amazing, dynamic, and creative community builders, and many of whom want to stay in Russia because they want to be leaders in their community, and they want to be leaders in the Jewish community, which I found so inspiring. But just very quickly, I'll talk about, there was a law that was enacted in Russia called the Foreign Agent Law, which requires anyone who's associated with a US-based organization or any organization that's part of a country that's deemed to be adversarial, which the United States is one currently, requires them to register. And this puts our community builders at great risk. And we did not want them to have to take that risk. Also, the financial challenges of getting money in and out of the country, because we provide reimbursements and a rent subsidy for our programs. We were no longer able to do that legally. And so that was a really sad, challenging situation. But this war, again, sadly, we did see a mass migration of Russians and Ukrainians around the world. And so we opened a number of new RSJ Moishe houses in Europe, in North America, and of course in Israel, which are well operating today. And we're seeing the incredible programs that are coming out of it. And I'll also say we have a number of houses where it's Russians and Ukrainians living and programming together, which, much like a lot of our community builders, really helps restore my faith in humanity and the next generation, just looking at these young adults and all the great impact that they're having, not just in the Jewish community, but the world writ large. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I met some of them when I visited the house in Haifa. And they said, we're a mixed house. And it's like, what do you mean? It's we have Russian and Ukraine together.
It's
So
a
it's
beautiful, beautiful house. Yeah.
a mixed house. So
Yeah.
it's
And you'll
very,
see their programs. I don't know if you went to any of their programs, but like 100 people will show up to like
yeah.
any random event, Russians and Ukrainians, people from Belarus, uh, people who moved to Israel like in the 90s or early 2000s. It is just like a beautiful microcosm of this community, and really looks, it's like a vision of what I hope that the future looks more like.
Yeah, and I follow them on Instagram, so there's always something, always
So fun.
something.
Yeah, yeah.
They're wonderful.
They had the
Yeah,
coolest looking Purim party. I was like so wanted to be there.
yeah, they're really doing a great work, and again to spread these ideas and the spirit all over the globe for more young adults. I wish that this is mostly for the Jewish community, but we are inviting also non-Jews to come and join us, but to see how to duplicate maybe to other young adults, because I know, especially now in the United States, lots of young adults feel that they're not connected, or they're alone. There is this like loneliness,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's an epidemic, right? Our Surgeon General in the United States talked about the epidemic of loneliness. This is an anecdote to loneliness and isolation, which has so many other like debilitating, negative effects on one's health and on society. And so a lot of our Moishe houses are open to their wider community, which I think is beautiful. A lot of those non-Jews sometimes are like, hey, I have a Jewish friend that they end up bringing. There are a lot of interfaith events as well, but I do hope that it's a model that others can recreate, because it is really beautiful and it serves a really, really important purpose for young adults.
yeah, and I think in different cities, in different towns, to create something that they feel that they are contributing, but they have a community, and then as a society we will thrive. So I do hope, before we end, unless you have any message to the world that you want to share with us, I definitely would like to again to emphasize like how much Moishe House is bringing so much good, so much light to the world, even though it's a time of war in Israel, Ukraine, or any other crisis, and not in time of crisis. And any time, it's to creating these young adults that are very passionate and capable and adapting and bringing so much good to the world.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. And I guess my parting message would be like, if you're watching this, to go to our website and learn more and get in touch with your local Moishe House or local base or local MHWOW host or Embark or retreats, whatever is happening. If you're a young adult, get involved. We would love to have you as a part of our programs and to be a part of this network. If you're an educator or anything else, just it's a great model to learn from, and we're always happy to share resources. We really do believe that that great Jewish content floats all boats. So please learn more about Moishe House and get involved, and we would love to have you as a part of this community.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tiffany. And I would like to conclude again, this is Education in Time of War. My name is Rachel Raz, and this was a conversation with Tiffany Harris, Chief Program Officer of Moishe House. So thank you very much, Tiffany, for joining us.
Thank you,
And
Raphael.
for our audience, I hope you will join us for other recording, and hopefully we will inspire you even when we're talking of a time of war, that there's lots of amazing and inspiring stories that we can learn from, and hopefully make us more optimistic and leave us uplifted.
Amen.
So thank you very much.